Don't sleep, sir. The bus can leave. You can't. Maya Brooks dropped to her knees in the rain and pressed 2 fingers against the stranger's wrist, though the driver behind her was already shouting for her to get on. The man's suit cost more than her mother made in a month, but his skin had gone gray beneath the streetlight, and everyone else had stepped around him like he was trash. 20 minutes earlier, Maya had been standing under the cracked plastic roof of the bus shelter across from St. Mercy Hospital, counting the seconds between thunder and the flicker of the overhead light. The rain came sideways, cold enough to sting her cheeks, soaking through the cuffs of her jeans and filling the split seam of her left sneaker. In her fist was a wrinkled ticket for the number 47 bus, the last one running toward the east side before midnight. She had folded it twice so the rain would not smear the ink, then unfolded it again because she needed to see it was still real. One ride, one way home. Behind her, St. Mercy Hospital glowed white and clean against the black sky. All glass doors, polished floors, and warm lobby lights. Somewhere on the 4th floor, her mother was still working, pushing a gray mop bucket through rooms where people rarely learned her name. Tanya Brooks had told Maya to go home before the last bus, to lock the apartment door, to heat the leftover rice in the microwave, and not to wait up. But Maya had seen the way her mother's hand trembled when she signed the yellow warning slip that morning. She had seen the hospital bill folded inside Tanya's lunchbox, the one with red numbers circled so hard the paper had nearly torn. The bus shelter smelled like wet concrete, diesel, and the bitter perfume of a woman who had passed through moments before without looking at her. On the bench beside Maya, an empty paper coffee cup rolled back and forth in the wind. Across the street, 2 security cameras turned slowly above the private entrance, their small red lights blinking like tired eyes. Maya looked down at her old phone. 3% battery. No new messages from her mother. Then she heard the sound. Not thunder. Not traffic. A body hitting the sidewalk. A tall white man in a dark suit had stumbled out near the hospital's side gate, one hand clutching his chest, the other gripping the pole of a street sign. For a second he stayed upright, his face twisted in confusion, as if the world had tilted without warning. Then his knees gave out. People saw him. Maya knew they saw him. A man under a black umbrella slowed, stared, and kept walking. A nurse in blue scrubs hesitated at the curb, then pulled her hood lower and crossed the other way. The bus growled to a stop, its doors folding open with a hiss. Warm yellow light spilled across Maya's shoes. "Last ride, kid," the driver called. "You getting on or not?" Maya looked at the ticket in her hand. She looked at the man on the sidewalk. Rain bounced off his expensive watch. His fingers scraped weakly against the concrete. For one terrible second, she imagined her mother standing outside after a night shift, unseen, unheard, too tired to call for help. Maya stepped away from the bus. "Hey!" the driver snapped. "I'm not waiting." She ran to the man and dropped beside him, her knees splashing into a shallow puddle. "Sir," she said, not loudly but firmly. "Look at me." His eyes opened a little, pale blue, lost. He tried to speak, but only air came out. Maya slipped her backpack off, shoved it under his head, and pulled her mother's thin wool scarf from around her own neck to cover his chest. The bus doors closed behind her. The engine groaned. She did not turn around. "Stay awake," she whispered. "My mama says if somebody is scared, you don't leave them alone with the dark." The man's eyes shifted toward her voice. For half a second, something in his face changed, not trust exactly, but surprise, as if he had not expected the smallest person at that bus stop to be the one who stayed. His hand twitched against her sleeve. Maya reached for his wrist to feel his pulse, and that was when she saw the red hospital bracelet half hidden beneath his cuff, snapped tight against his skin, printed with the words St. Mercy Hospital and, beneath the rain-blurred name, 2 small words that made her stomach go cold. Private hold. The words looked too important for a man. Abandoned in the rain. Maya did not understand what private hold meant, but she understood the way grown-ups used quiet words to make dangerous things sound clean. She wiped the bracelet with her thumb, trying to read the name above it, but the ink had blurred under the rain until only a few letters remained. Iwit. The man's eyelids fluttered, and she leaned closer. "Sir, can you hear me?" His mouth moved. Nothing came out at first. Then, barely louder than the rain, he whispered, "Not inside." Maya froze for one beat, her hand still around his wrist. Across the street, St. Mercy's glass doors opened and closed as if the building were breathing without caring who died outside it. A janitor pushed a yellow mop bucket near the entrance. A woman in a white coat stepped out, glanced toward the bus stop, then looked down at her phone. Normal things. Clean things. Things that should have made Maya feel safer. But the doctor's eyes moved too quickly from the man to the bracelet, and then away, like she had seen something she was not supposed to see. Maya pulled her old phone from her pocket. The screen lit up weakly. 2%. Her fingers were so wet the first swipe failed. She wiped them on her jeans and dialed 911. When the operator answered, Maya's voice came out small, but steady. A man collapsed outside St. Mercy Hospital, by the number 47 stop. He has a red hospital bracelet. He can't breathe right. The operator asked if the man was conscious. Maya looked down. His eyes had opened again, just a little, fixed on her face with a strange, frightened focus that did not match his suit or his watch or the expensive leather shoes darkening in the puddle. "A little," Maya said. "But he's scared." The operator told her to stay with him, to keep him warm, to watch his breathing. Maya tucked the phone between her ear and shoulder, then pulled her backpack fully under his head, so his cheek would not rest on the concrete. Her bus ticket, soft from rain, stuck to her palm. She almost put it back in her pocket, but then she folded it around the edge of her phone case, as if saving that wet piece of paper could prove later that she had given something up. The bus was gone now. Only the smell of diesel remained, fading under the sharper smell of rain on asphalt. Somewhere above the hospital doors, a security camera turned slowly toward the street. Maya saw the red light blink twice. Then, just as it reached the bus stop, it stopped and turned back toward the ambulance bay. Her stomach tightened. "Why did it look away?" she whispered, not to the operator, not even to the man, but to the rain itself. The man's fingers brushed her sleeve again. He was trying to lift his hand. Maya followed the motion and noticed something under the metal bench, half hidden near a crushed coffee lid. A tiny red piece of plastic. At first she thought it was trash. Then lightning flashed, pale and brief, and she saw its shape clearly. It was curved with a jagged edge, the same color as the clasp on his bracelet. Maya reached under the bench and picked it up. The broken piece was slick between her fingers, not snapped by accident. "Cut." The operator's voice crackled through the phone, asking if help had arrived yet. Maya looked toward the hospital just as a side door opened, and 2 security guards stepped out before any paramedic did. The taller one scanned the sidewalk, not like he was searching for a patient, but like he was searching for a witness. Maya closed her fist around the red plastic. The man's lips moved one more time, and this time she heard him clearly. "Don't let them change it." Maya kept her fist closed so tightly the broken plastic dug into her palm. The 2 guards came across the street without running, which somehow frightened her more. People ran when they were trying to save someone. These men moved like they were arriving for something they already knew would be there. The taller one wore a black rain jacket with St. Mercy security stitched in white over his chest. His name tag said Porter. He looked once at the man on the ground, then at Maya, then at the phone pressed against her ear. "Who are you talking to?" he asked. 911, Maya said. "He needs help." Porter's face changed for only a second, not enough for most adults to notice. But Maya noticed small things. She noticed how her mother's boss smiled before handing out warning slips. She noticed when a nurse said thank you without looking at the janitor cleaning blood off the floor. She noticed when grown-ups were surprised and trying to hide it. The second guard crouched beside the man and reached first for the bracelet. Not for his throat, not for his chest. Maya leaned forward. "He said not to change it." Porter's eyes snapped back to her. "What did he say?" The operator was still talking in Maya's ear, asking if medical help had arrived. Maya did not answer Porter right away. She looked at the red band again. Rain had washed the printed name into a blur, but beneath the smeared letters, the first line was clearer now under the flashing light from the hospital entrance. Elliot Whitmore. Maya knew the name because it was carved in silver letters above the lobby, because her mother cleaned under those letters every night, because every employee badge had the same last name stamped in small print under the hospital logo. Whitmore Medical Group. The man on the sidewalk was not just rich. He was the name on the building. "Is that Mr. Whitmore?" Maya asked softly. The second guard's hand stopped. Porter forced a short laugh. "Kid, don't read things you don't understand." But the man on the ground stirred at the sound of his name. His eyes opened halfway, unfocused but awake enough to find Maya's face. For a breath, he looked less like a billionaire and more like somebody trapped inside a bad dream. "Bracelet," he whispered. "Please." It was not trust. Not yet. It was only fear finding the one person who had stayed close enough to hear it. Then the private side doors of the hospital burst open, and a small white emergency cart rolled out, pushed by an orderly in a clear poncho. Maya heard the squeak of its wheels over the rain. On the front of the cart, a digital dispatch screen glowed blue. She saw the time before the orderly tilted it away. "VIP transfer requested. 10:56 p.m. Maya looked down at her phone. The 911 call timer read 4 minutes and 12 seconds. She had called at 11:03. Her mouth went dry. The cart had been sent before she called for help. A woman in blue scrubs hurried behind it, tucking something into her coat pocket. For half a second, Maya saw the edge of it under the fluorescent light from the doorway. A red plastic clasp, curved and jagged, just like the piece hidden in her fist. The woman looked at Maya, then looked away too fast. Porter reached for Maya's shoulder, his voice suddenly gentle in the way warnings sometimes pretended to be kindness. "You did enough. Let the hospital handle him now." Maya stepped back, but she did not open her hand, because now she knew the broken piece under the bench had not fallen there by accident. Maya did not fight when Porter guided her across the street, but she made sure her closed fist stayed tucked inside her coat pocket. The rain fell harder as they brought Elliot Whitmore through the private entrance. Not the emergency doors. Not the bright public lobby where ordinary people waited under buzzing lights with insurance cards and plastic wristbands. This hallway had marble floors, tall white orchids, a silver coffee machine, and a receptionist who stopped typing the moment she saw Maya dripping water onto the rug. Elliot was rolled past her on the cart, his eyes half open, unfocused but searching. For 1 second, his gaze found the small girl in the wet coat. Maya lifted her chin as if to say she was still there. Then a nurse stepped between them and the moment vanished. "Sit here," Porter said, pointing to a low gray chair beside a vending machine. The chair was so close to the trash can that Maya's knee touched the metal rim when she sat. Across from her, a silent television mounted on the wall showed Elliot Whitmore smiling at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, one hand raised beside the glowing St. Mercy logo. Under the picture, the caption read "Hospital Visionary Honored for Service to Underserved Families." Maya stared at the words until they blurred. Her mother was somewhere upstairs cleaning rooms in that same hospital, with cracked knuckles and a warning slip folded in her locker. A woman in blue scrubs approached, the same one who had tucked something into her coat outside. Her badge said Marcy Keene, Senior Charge Nurse. She carried Maya's wet bus ticket between 2 fingers like it was something pulled from a drain. "This yours?" Maya reached for it. Marcy held it back a second too long. "You know, sweetheart, when a man like Mr. Whitmore gets sick, people get nervous. Things go missing. Stories get made up. It becomes very confusing." Her voice was soft enough to sound kind to anyone passing by. "I didn't make up anything," Maya said. Marcy laid the ticket on the counter in front of the receptionist. "Then you won't mind waiting until security writes down exactly what happened." Porter stood behind Maya, polite and heavy in the silence. Another man arrived in a tailored charcoal coat, thin glasses, silver hair combed neatly back. Richard Vale did not look wet at all, as if the rain had been instructed not to touch him. He glanced at Maya's shoes, then at the muddy drops on the marble floor. "This is the child?" he asked. Marcy nodded. Richard crouched slightly, not enough to be humble, only enough to make his voice lower. "Maya Brooks, isn't it?" Her fingers tightened around the broken red clasp in her pocket. She had not told him her name. "Your mother works nights on 4, Richard continued gently. "Tanya is a hard-working woman. I would hate for a misunderstanding to make her shift more difficult." The vending machine hummed. Somewhere behind the glass doors, rain ticked against the windows. Maya looked at Richard, then at Marcy, then at Porter. "If it's a misunderstanding," she said, "why did the cart come before I called?" For the first time, Richard's pleasant expression did not move fast enough to hide the pause. He stood, smoothed his coat, and told Porter to take her statement. He thought the hallway had swallowed the question. But on the receptionist's counter, beside Maya's wet ticket, the private dispatch screen still showed the timestamp he had forgotten to clear. Richard moved quickly after that, but never in a way that looked like panic. He simply stepped between Maya and the counter, smiled at the receptionist, and said, "The child is tired. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Then he guided her into a small consultation room with frosted glass walls. The kind of room where bad news could be delivered softly. There was a box of tissues on the table, a framed watercolor of a meadow, and a clock that ticked too loudly for a place trying to feel calm. Porter stayed by the door. Marcy came in carrying a dry towel and a paper cup of hot chocolate, placing both in front of Maya as if kindness could erase the way she had been spoken to outside. "You're soaked," Marcy said. "Drink something warm." Maya looked at the cup. A skin of steam trembled on top. Her hands were cold enough to hurt, but she did not touch it. Richard sat across from her and slid a cream-colored envelope onto the table. "Taxi money," he said. "A little extra for the inconvenience. No one is blaming you." Maya stared at the envelope, then at the towel, then at the door behind him. "Where is his bracelet?" Richard's smile thinned. "Mr. Whitmore is receiving excellent care." "That's not what I asked." Porter shifted slightly. In the quiet, Maya could hear the rain tapping against the narrow window and, somewhere far down the hall, the soft clatter of a cleaning cart. The sound made her think of her mother pushing one at 2 in the morning, trying not to wake patients who would never know who emptied their trash. Maya slowly pulled her hand from her pocket. The broken red clasp lay in her palm, small and wet and ugly under the fluorescent light. Marcy's eyes flicked to it before she could stop herself. Richard did not look at the clasp. He looked at Maya. "Where did you get that?" "Under the bus bench," Maya said. "Before your people came." The door opened before Richard could answer. Elliot Whitmore stood there in a hospital robe, pale, one hand gripping an 4-pole, the other wrist circled by a clean white bracelet. A nurse hovered behind him, whispering that he should be in bed, but Elliot did not move. His eyes went first to Richard, then to Maya, then to the red plastic in her open hand. For a long moment he said nothing. The room seemed to hold its breath around him. Then he looked down at his own wrist. The new white band read admitted 11:18 p.m., Maya's old phone, lying face up beside the untouched hot chocolate, still showed her emergency call log. 11:03 p.m. Elliot stared at those 2 times, and something old crossed his face. Not fear exactly, but recognition. Years ago, after his wife died during a night when paperwork had been changed too late and questions had been answered too neatly, he had ordered red bands for private medical holds because they were not supposed to be removed without 2 signatures and a recorded reason. He lifted his wrist slowly. "Richard," he said, his voice very quiet, "why am I wearing a new bracelet?" Richard did not flinch. That was what made him convincing. He looked at Elliot's wrist as if seeing the white band for the first time, then turned slightly toward Marcy. "Standard post-admission replacement," he said. The red band was soaked. "We needed a clean scan for medication safety." It was a reasonable answer. The kind of answer that had ended 1,000 questions in board meetings, audits, and grief-struck family conferences. Elliot looked at him for a moment longer, then nodded once, almost tiredly. "Of course." Richard's shoulders relaxed by a fraction. He believed the danger had passed because Elliot Whitmore had always valued control over confrontation. Elliot let him believe it. He lowered himself into the chair beside the consultation table. His face still pale, his voice mild. "Maya," he said, "is that your name?" She nodded. Her fingers closed around the red clasp again. "You can keep the towel," he said. Maya looked at the towel, then at the cream envelope still sitting untouched on the table. "I don't want money," she said. "I want nobody to blame my mama because I didn't get on the bus." The room changed around that sentence. Not loudly, not with gasps, just a small shift like cold air slipping under a door. Elliot's eyes moved to Richard for the briefest second, then away. "Your mother works here?" "Fourth floor," Maya said. "Nights." Richard gave a soft, careful smile. "Mr. Whitmore, the child has had a frightening evening. Her mother is a staff member." "Yes, but this is not connected." Elliot nodded again, as if accepting the shape of the explanation. Then he turned to the nurse behind him. "Would you please get Ms. Brooks a warm blanket?" When the nurse left, he reached for Maya's old phone on the table. He did not pick it up without asking, "May I look at the call time?" Maya hesitated, then slid it toward him. "Just don't delete anything." "I won't." His thumb hovered carefully above the cracked screen. "Emergency call, 11:03 p.m. incoming missed call from mom. 10:41 p.m. battery 1%. The phone vibrated once in his hand, weak and sudden. A low buzz against the table. Everyone looked at it. A voicemail notification appeared, too small for Richard to read from across the room. Elliot saw the sender name, Mama. He handed it back without opening it. "Save that." The rain tapped at the window behind them. Somewhere beyond the frosted glass, a cleaning machine moved down the hallway with a low electric hum, steady and indifferent. For a few seconds, the world became small enough to hear the paper cup of hot chocolate cooling. A tiny pop in the lid as steam escaped. Then Elliot stood. "Richard, I'd like to rest now. But before I sleep, send my office the ambulance dispatch report, the bracelet change log, the hallway camera from 10:50 to 11:30, and Ms. Brooks's personnel file." Richard's smile held. "Tonight. Tonight." Elliot's voice stayed soft. "And send it to Nathaniel Pierce, not internal compliance." That was the first mistake Richard could not hide. His eyes flicked up. Nathaniel Pierce was not hospital staff. He was Elliot's private attorney, the man Richard had spent years avoiding whenever numbers needed smoothing before they reached the owner's desk. "Of course," Richard said. Elliot turned back toward Maya. "Did anyone tell you not to talk?" Maya looked at Richard, then at the envelope. "They told me if I loved my mama, I would go home." Elliot was silent for a long time, long enough that Richard began to speak, then thought better of it. At last Elliot looked at the white bracelet on his wrist, clean, printed, perfect, and understood that the child in the wet coat had protected the one piece of truth his own hospital had tried to replace. And for the first time in years, he wondered how many lies had sounded reasonable simply because Richard Vale had said them calmly. Elliot did not ask Richard to leave. That would have warned him too early. Instead, he let the silence become useful. He sat back down beside the consultation table, moving slowly, like a man too weak to argue, and asked for water. Marcy reached for the paper cup near Maya, but Elliot lifted one hand. "A sealed bottle, please." The request was small enough to sound ordinary. Marcy's hand paused above the cup, then withdrew. Maya saw it. Elliot saw Maya see it. Neither of them spoke. A few minutes later, Nathaniel Pierce arrived in a dark overcoat with rain on his shoulders and no expression on his face. He greeted Elliot quietly, glanced once at Maya's wet shoes, and placed a slim laptop on the table. The screen glowed blue. A file transfer window appeared, loading slowly from the hospital server. 10%, 12, 15. Richard stood near the door with his hands folded in front of him. Calm again, though his thumb kept rubbing the side of his index finger. Elliot looked almost tired. "Richard, help me understand something," he said. "The child says I was at the bus stop. Your report says I was found near the side gate. Richard nodded. Correct. Those are close enough to confuse? In a storm with a child frightened, yes. Elliot accepted that with a faint nod. And my red band was removed for safety. Yes. By Marcy. Richard looked at her. Marcy looked at him. It lasted less than a second, but it was there. By nursing staff, Richard said. Maya sat very still, the broken red clasp hidden under the towel in her lap. Elliot turned to her, his voice gentle. Maya, when the cart came, did you see who touched the bracelet first? Porter shifted by the wall. Richard's mouth tightened. Mr. Whitmore, with respect. She was in shock. Maya looked at the untouched envelope on the table, then at the cup of hot chocolate she still had not drunk. I was scared, she said. But scared does not make me blind. No one moved. Even the file on Nathaniel's laptop seemed to take longer to load. 38%. Elliot's face did not change, but his eyes sharpened. Tell me only what you remember. Maya swallowed. The guard touched it first outside. Then Nurse Marcy tucked a red piece into her coat. Marcy gave a soft laugh. That is not true. Elliot looked at her. Then empty your coat pocket. The room went so quiet the rain on the glass sounded loud. Marcy's hand rose halfway toward her pocket, then stopped. Richard stepped forward smoothly. There is no need to humiliate staff over a child's confusion. Elliot did not raise his voice. I asked for a pocket, not a confession. Nathaniel turned the laptop slightly. The camera light above the screen blinked once. Recording. Marcy saw it. Richard saw it. And Maya, who had spent her life being told to stand outside rooms where decisions were made, watched Richard understand at last that she was no longer outside anything. Marcy did not empty her pocket right away. That was the first confession her body made before her mouth could arrange a cleaner one. Her fingers hovered at the edge of her coat, pale against the blue fabric, while Richard's face settled into the careful blankness of a man waiting for someone else to make the mistake for him. Elliot watched in silence. Nathaniel's laptop continued loading. 64%. 71. The camera light blinked once more. A tiny green eye that made the consultation room feel smaller than it had before. Marcy, Elliot said quietly. The pocket. She swallowed. Mr. Whitmore, I don't know what that child thinks she saw. Then show me what she did not see. Slowly, Marcy reached inside her coat and pulled out a red plastic clasp. It was wet, jagged on one side, and shaped exactly like the piece Maya had been holding under the towel. No one spoke. Maya opened her own palm and placed her broken piece on the table. The two pieces sat apart for a moment, bright against the gray surface. Then Nathaniel slid them together with one finger. They matched. Richard exhaled through his nose, almost disappointed. A broken band proves nothing except poor handling during a medical emergency. Elliot did not look at him. He was looking at the clasp, and something in his face had gone very still. Play the file, he said. Nathaniel tapped the laptop. The hospital camera footage appeared first. The private hallway outside the VIP wing, timestamped 10:54 p.m. Elliot Whitmore was visible near the side exit, unsteady but walking. Richard stood beside him, one hand on his elbow, speaking close to his ear. Marcy followed with a chart. There was no storm in the hallway, no confusion, no crowd. Then the screen flickered. The image vanished for 42 seconds. When it returned, the hallway was empty. Richard gave a measured sigh. That camera has been unreliable for months. Maya looked at her phone. Mine was not. Everyone turned toward her. She pulled the cracked little phone closer, the one with 1% battery and rain still dried in the speaker holes. When I called 911, I didn't hang up, she said. I put it by my ear, then I dropped it on my backpack when the guards came. Kept recording until it died. Nathaniel connected the phone with a cable. The room waited while the file transferred, the progress circle turning slowly. Outside the frosted glass, the cleaning machine passed again, humming low and steady, as if the building were trying to polish the floor under their feet while the truth rose through it. Then the audio began. Rain first. Maya's thin breathing. Elliot's broken whisper. Don't let them change it. Then wheels against wet pavement. Porter's voice asking what he had said. Marcy's voice, low and sharp, cut the red band. Mr. Vale said no record he was outside. A rustle. A door. Then Richard's voice, calm enough to be worse than anger. Put the missing meds under Brooks's locker before morning. If Whitmore wakes confused, the cleaner takes the fall. Elliot did not move. His face drained until he looked almost the same color he had under the streetlight. He stared at the laptop, then at the red clasp, then at Maya's wet bus ticket lying beside the envelope of taxi money. For several seconds, the man who owned hospitals, signed charity checks, and trusted reports more than people could not speak. The pain did not come all at once. It moved across his face slowly as he understood what his name had protected. Not just a lie about one rainy night, but years of quiet cruelty done under clean lights, by people who knew he would never look low enough to see the ones mopping the floors. Richard finally said, "Elliot, think carefully about the damage this could do." Elliot placed the red clasp on top of the envelope Richard had offered Maya, flattening it with 2 fingers. His voice, when it came, was almost gentle. "Nathaniel, lock every file and call the Inspector General." Nathaniel did not raise his voice either. He simply closed the laptop halfway, took out his phone, and stepped toward the frosted glass door. Richard reached for his sleeve, then stopped before touching him. That small, unfinished movement told everyone in the room that power had begun to move away from him. By morning, St. Mercy no longer felt clean, felt exposed. The board was called before sunrise. The Inspector General's office received the audio file, the bracelet log, the camera gap, the dispatch record, and the payroll reports Nathaniel had pulled from servers Richard thought no one outside operations would ever read. Marcy was escorted from the building with her badge in a plastic evidence sleeve. Porter was suspended pending review. Richard Vale stood in the boardroom in the same charcoal coat, speaking carefully about context, liability, and reputation until Elliot placed Maya's wet bus ticket on the table in front of him. "This child gave up her last way home," Elliot said. "You offered her money to make that sacrifice disappear." Richard looked around the room for someone willing to look back. No one did. He was removed from his position before breakfast, his access revoked, his accounts frozen for audit, and his name referred to investigators for obstruction, wage theft, and falsifying medical records. But the harder part came after the powerful people left. Tanya Brooks was brought upstairs from the employee locker room, still wearing her gray uniform, one sleeve damp from a mop bucket, her hands rough and cracked from chemicals. She entered like someone expecting punishment. When she saw Maya sitting beside Elliot with a blanket around her shoulders, fear crossed her face so quickly it hurt to watch. "Baby," she whispered, "what did they make you sign?" Maya stood and pulled the old metal lunchbox from her backpack. Its corners were bent, its handle wrapped in tape. "Nothing," she said. "I kept your papers." Tanya's knees almost weakened, but she did not fall. Elliot walked around the table and stopped several feet from her. Not too close, not pretending one apology could erase years. "Ms. Brooks," he said, "your suspension is void. Your wages, and the wages of every employee affected by these altered records, will be repaid with penalties. You will have independent counsel paid by the hospital, not chosen by this hospital. Your medical debt is under review. No manager here will be allowed to speak to you without representation present." Tanya looked at him as if she had heard the words but did not yet trust a world where they could be true. Elliot understood that. For once, he did not demand belief from someone his building had already failed. Over the next weeks, St. Mercy changed in ways that could be seen and ways that mattered more because they could not. A worker protection office was created outside hospital management. The night shift bus program began running past midnight. Security cameras could no longer be disabled by operations alone. The employee entrance received lights that did not flicker and a bench that was not placed beside the trash. Tanya kept her job, but not under the same people. She moved into a safer apartment with a lock that worked, and Maya received a scholarship fund managed through a community trust. Not as charity to silence her, but as a promise that telling the truth should not cost a child her future. One evening, a month after the rain, Elliot stood at the number 47 stop with Maya and her mother. He wore no overcoat despite the cold. Maya's old phone, repaired but still scratched, rested in her pocket. The bus pulled up, warm light opening across the curb. Before she stepped on, Maya handed Elliot the red clasp sealed in a small evidence bag. "You should keep this until everybody listens," she said. Elliot looked down at it, then at the little girl who had once knelt beside him while the whole hospital looked away. His eyes filled, but he only nodded. Maya climbed onto the bus with her mother, and this time no door closed against her. Behind them, St. Mercy glowed against the night, no longer just a name on glass, because one poor black girl had spoken softly enough for power to ignore her, and bravely enough that, in the end, it had to listen.